First off, let me go around and introduce this panel of guitar and bass gods that are sitting up here with me. This guy right here is the master of disaster, Jason Bieler of Saigon Kick. Also the founder of Bieler Brothers Records and put out records for Nonpoint and Skindred and produced a record for me for Switched. Awesome. Ron Bumblefoot Thal, you all know him from his tenure in Guns N' Roses and now Sons of Apollo and Art of Anarchy and every other band that exists. Steve Lynch, the legendary guitarist of Autograph. This guy literally has 15 fingers. You just can't see 5 of them. You know who that guy in the end is, right? That's David Ellefson, the Grammy-winning bassist of Megadeth. I know that guy. That guy's the guy who kept beeping my horn on the way over here when we were in 7-Eleven. And I said, "Get off my horn, corn!" Give it up for Brian Head Welch! And of course, these two guys, if there are ever two brothers that rocked harder than anybody, I can name them. Troy and Kyle Sanders from Mastodon and Hell Yeah. And what a panel! Like, I know, right? That's oh my jeez. All right, who wants to start? Let's talk. So we're going to talk about guitars, about gear, about playing. I don't know. We're talking about whatever the hell I want to talk about. I'm the host, so why doesn't everybody talk about how you started playing and what made you start playing and let's start there. So who's got the microphone? Let's start back here with Troy and we'll pass it around.
Well, all right.
Start with the brothers Sanders.
I wasn't paying attention. What was the question? How do we start?
Yeah, how did you start playing? Especially you two guys. You're brothers. Were you in a musical household?
It's a really good
two
question.
of you guys grew up to be rock stars. That's pretty impressive. I mean, Nelson, there's not many other, And you guys are way prettier, just for the record.
There was, I was trying to date this girl in 7th grade. Her name was Carrie Thompson, and she turned me on to Megadeth, believe it or not, in the bus, and we got in trouble for listening to the cassette in the back of the bus. And I had to write a note home to my mother explaining why I got in trouble. But and then at home, my older brother Kyle, right here, was a couple years older than me, and he was in high school, and he was in a band with some dudes, and they were covering Cheap Trick and Kiss and Van Halen, and I realized that was an amazing life that he was starting to do, and I wanted to quit everything I did personally, and just kind of made a full sharp left turn in life, and I just picked up a bass guitar, his actually, which is a left-handed one, flipped it around to be a righty, and learned Lick It Up by Kiss, which is just one note for about 3 minutes, and I just wanted to be a bass player in a band ever since. So I credit everything to a lot of people, but most importantly, this guy right here. I basically just wanted to follow his footsteps, and I have. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Where is she now? Carrie Thompson, are you here?
I bet she's on Facebook.
All Points Bulletin, Carrie Thompson. Thank you.
I think the first time, it was Cliff Burton for me. I saw him.
Woo!
I just saw, it definitely wasn't the internet, so I'm not sure where I saw it, but it was Cliff playing For Whom the Bell Tolls on Day on the Green in Oakland, California. And just whatever it was, watching that, and just the way he was, his style and movement and finger play and everything, it just really struck a chord. It's like, well, that's what I'm going to do. I got to figure out how to play that thing. So I did find how to find. I'm a lefty, which is this place has 4, which is amazing, 4 or 5. This is a great place. Usually there was 0, so I had to find a right-handed bass that was an equal cutaway. It was kind of like the Gene Simmons bass, but it was a Lotus. And it was right-handed. I flipped it over to play left-handed with the electronics up top, but then just started headphones in my room. It was Cliff, Steve Harris, Geezer Butler. That just made me, 3 badass finger players, and just, pretty. It really just really resonated with me, and that's when I knew this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to figure it out. Just stay driven and motivated to keep moving forward, going through all the dark, rough times, and just coming out ahead. And at least, I'm happy in my life. Everything I've done, up and down, at least I'm grateful that I'm still doing what I set out to do when I was a young lad. So that's it. That's the story.
Awesome. We'll pass it on over to Head. Brian, same question.
It was 1980. I opened my Christmas present. It was a black square album. I put it on the record player, and it started Back in Black. That was it. That was it. I swear that was it. I was like, I wanna bang my head for a living and get paid for it. And so my mom was like, okay, you want to play guitar? Oh, actually, I told my dad I want to play drums, and he talked me out of it. He's like, you want to carry all those pieces? And I'm like, oh. You know, he peeled to that side of me, the lazy side, and I'm like, if you play guitar, you know, you get just one instrument. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And then they said, okay, we'll get you an acoustic guitar, and you learn, if you show us that you mean it, then we'll get you an electric and an amp. And so after learning just some little kids' rhymes or whatever, and Mary Had a Little Lamb, you know, I showed my mom, then they went and got me one. And so I was hanging out at a
Sorry, I find that
music
kind of
store.
ironic, that part. I'm
What?
sorry. The Mary Had a Little Lamb thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's where you started. It kind of came full circle, really.
I always forgot about that. But then I was in a guitar shop just like this, taking lessons just like, you know, the youngsters do, and just learning everything I could. And so I was glued to MTV every day. I would just sit there with my guitar and learn scales and everything. I really wanted to do this for a living. And now it's, you know, here we are all these years later. So it's a blessing and a curse.
Awesome. Pass it down to Dave. Mr. Ellefson.
Well, Kiss is, I'm of the Kiss generation.
Not Lick It Up, though.
No, not Lick It Up, not the 80s
That's not
Kiss,
his Kiss.
In fact, the first thing, I was just a kid, my brother and I, we had like an hour ride on the school bus. I lived on a farm like 6 miles north of a little town of like 3,000 people, a little farming town. And ironically, the pastor's son was the bus driver one year, and he had long hair, and he was cool. His name was Dwight, I think. And he used to tune into WLS, an AM station out of Chicago. And at that time were things like early Styx, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Kiss Shouted Out Loud was on the radio. I mean, that was really probably the song. That and like BTO, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, like that kind of stuff. And what was different about, like when I grew up in the house and we could watch Hee Haw, right, on Saturday night, right? Right, which I always loved because I just love looking at the guitars. You know, it's kind of like being in here, right? Except Tellys just weren't metal. And still aren't. I'm sorry, they're just not. But whatever, that's a whole other story. Yeah. But they twang. That's what they're great at. They twang.
I just said anything can be a metal guitar if you play metal on it. We had that discussion before you
yeah,
got out.
some guitars have songs in them. I don't know. I think Tellys have like country songs in them, you know. But they're great at that. They're awesome at that. But so I just was grasping in anything, you know. And you know, the Beatles were not my generation, and I make no apologies. In fact, Alex Skolnick and I got into a heated argument about that the Beatles are not all that. There's other music beyond that, and I say that because. The Beatles were done and over by the time I was starting to listen to music. And actually, Paul McCartney and the Wings, that's my Beatles, if there was one. That's just the music that was out when I was growing up. And then Kiss, when I saw the Kiss Halloween special, well, the Paul Lynde Halloween special, where they came down in the elevator and came out and apparently air guitared, but it looked pretty cool when I watched it. And that just changed my life. You know, that was my Beatles. People like Kiss talk about watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and how it changed their life. Well, Kiss on the Paul Lynde special, that was my Ed Sullivan moment. That's what changed my life, and it said, I want to do that. And to this day, I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. And that's why I'm here, you know, at age 54, going, God, one day I'm going to figure out how to do that, and then I'll know, and then I can quit doing this. But until then, I'm here with my friends and all of you today. So
basically 35 years trying to figure out how to be Gene Simmons. We're getting there.
Getting there.
Yeah, right? We are. We're literally, we do that every day. We trademarked 9 things since we've been up here.
Well, I did actually start playing influenced by the Beatles. It was like in 1964 when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. I saw that and I went, that is awesome. Because I watched the way my sisters reacted and the girls in the audience. I said, I want to do that too. And, you know, I was into the Stones and the Who and... you know, later on Led Zeppelin, and I was really into Hendrix at the time. There was this kid that lived down the block from me who already had a guitar, and he wanted me to play bass. So in 1967, I actually started playing bass, but I was such a Hendrix fan that I eventually switched over to guitar when Hendrix died in September 18th, 1970. I traded my bass in and got a Stratocaster that day. And I've been playing ever since. And through the years, I was influenced by mainly Jeff Beck, of course, Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page. And then later on, the last guitar player that I listened to, which was 1978, was Allan Holdsworth. And he influenced me a lot. In fact, I thought he was doing a lot of the stuff that he was doing just with his left hand. I thought he was doing it with two hands because the interval spread was so far apart. So, you know, and then in '83, Autograph got together, and after playing with about a dozen bands in LA before that, and you know, the rest kind of just took off from there. And 5 years ago, we decided to get back together again and go out and do it. And glad we did. We're having a good time.
And they have a new album out on mine and Dave's label, EMG
That's
label
right.
group, called Get Off Your Ass.
There's our promo guy right
That's
there.
me.
And some
Me.
coffee, which
Yeah,
even
they have
better.
autographed
Yeah.
coffee.
Even more important than the music.
See, we
is
are
coffee.
Gene Simmons. Yeah. Actually, I have a big money bag right back behind the curtain. You just can't see it. We all do. It's invisible. We're like leprechauns. Bumblefoot. Yarr.
So it was 1970 something, and I just moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island in New York City, and there was all these new kids in the neighborhood that I was meeting, all new friends and everything, and we all had older brothers and sisters that would just be buying albums. They'd be all over the house. I would go over to my friend's house, and I would just see all the stuff lying around. And see some Elton John album, looking at the artwork, like, wow, that's so weird, and looking at all different stuff. And then I saw Kiss Alive. I was like, oh, let's put this on. So I remember just me and my friend Bob McTighe, we're sitting there on his bunk bed, and his little stereo there had 2 speakers, and we just put it on. We're just staring at the speakers like watching TV, just staring at them. And it just begins. The crowd, like, how do y'all feel? All that stuff. And it just the energy coming off that we listened to the whole thing, first side, second side, third, fourth. And by the end of it, it's like, that's what I want to do. So I wanted to be a drummer, but I had an older brother, and he wanted to be a drummer. And I was about 5 or 6, and he was 8, and he said, well, I want to be the drummer too, so let's do a drum roll on our knee, and whoever can do it faster gets to be the drummer. Now, 6-year-olds, not that coordinated compared to an 8-year-old, so he won that. So he became the drummer, and thank God he did, because I am a god-awful drummer, and he's amazing. So that worked out. So I wanted to be a bass player, the same thing. I wanted to be Gene Simmons out of all the characters, you know, spitting the blood, breathing the fire, the wings, everything, all that stuff. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Gene Simmons. So my mom took me to a music store. I was like, I want to start taking bass lessons. And the guy looks at me, I'm like, this tall, a bass is this tall. I don't have the wingspan. There's no way I'd be able to do it. They didn't have kid-side basses. So they lied to me. They said, in order to play bass, you have to play a kid-sized nylon string acoustic guitar for 2 years. That was his way of locking me in for 2 years of lessons. I got scammed. So I was like, hey, whatever I got to do to be Gene Simmons, to do what he's doing, what's going on there. So
Take note of this replay. This could be kind of lucrative.
yeah, you can lock in a lot of kid-sized nylon string guitars. So that's what I did. And I started all the academics, just learning everything, how to read, all the music theory, tons of reading. And on the side, I had a band, and I was doing everything that I saw my idols doing. And now, this is the 70s when everything was great. Everything you heard, it doesn't matter what kind of music it was great. It was the best of what it was. That was the 70s. Yeah, no matter what. You turn on the radio, here's a new album from Led Zeppelin, and here's one from Queen, and here's one from, just everything was incredible. The funk was the best. The lounge music, everything. Hell, on the way over here, singing Tom Jones in the car. What am I doing? What was I singing? With these hands, I need the words. Cling to you.
Make it up. Nobody else knows the words either.
Forever and a day. And with these hands, I'll provide for you. I'll just do this like the next hour if we can. Never. Yeah, I'm down with all that. The David Cassidy, the Tom Jones, I love that stuff. And I love Manowar and all that too. It's like you gotta love it all. Because it's all good. It doesn't matter what kind of music it is. If it's good, it's good. It's all just beautiful waves that are just wearing a different set of clothing. And if they hit you, they hit you. So back to 1970 something. And this is going to be like the next hour now until you pull this mic away. So started a band. We were doing everything. We were writing songs. I didn't have anything to write about. I was 6. So all my songs were about the solar system. It was about planets and spaceships and things like that. And whatever was on the cartoons I was watching. So my first song was called Jupiter is Nice. And it completely ripped off Fox on the Run, because that's all I had to draw from. I had nothing, I had no building blocks yet. So all I had is whatever I heard on the radio. So it was Jupiter is nice, take my advice. But I started with the chorus. I knew, don't bore us, get right to it. So yeah, and then it went to the verse, but we don't care about that. So
Uranus is nice. Wait.
Yours is. Spent a week and a half in a van together. You'd be surprised. So we were making demos too. I had a cassette player on record. My brother's Bugs Bunny drum set he got at Sears was about 20 feet back. Be playing that. We had our little nylon kid-size guitars because I couldn't graduate up to the bass yet. Still had about a year and a half to go. And we were just playing up right next to it, and that's how we got levels. And then stand the thing up, hit play, another one facing it, hit record. Put our faces right next to it. Jupiter is nice. And that's how we overdubbed, and that's how we had our multi-track recording system for a bunch of little kids. But I learned a lot of lessons looking back on that. You learn that you don't need what you don't have. Everything you need, you have. And really, I listen to so many bands that are like, oh, I would love to do this, but I don't have this money, or I don't have a manager, or I don't have a record label, I don't have this, I don't have that. You have your creativity, and that is all the currency you need. You could do anything with that. And if the professor could build a radio out of coconuts, you can, with everything that we have at our disposal, especially in this day and age where all the information in the multiverse is in the palm of your hand. There's absolutely nothing you can't do. So don't make any excuses ever. If a 6-year-old could figure out how to multi-track, you today can do whatever you want to do. Figure it out. That's all I'm going to say, because I'll be here for the next 3 hours.
Yeah. And we got to hear from Bieler.
If the professor can make a radio out of coconuts. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I feel like I should not be like everybody else and say like I grew up listening to Tibetan throat music and Radiohead, so I can be the most credible guy on the panel. But around my house, my parents had 8 tracks of things like The Fifth Dimension and these like kind of great 70s things, and there was like Meet the Beatles, I remember, on 8-track, and I listened to that. My grandfather came over to the house one day and was like, look, let's go to this record store and I'll buy you any record you want. So being purely about the music, I picked out the coolest album cover, which was Destroyer by Kiss, because that just stood out to me. And I bought that record, and I was just like, this is the greatest thing of all time. Fell in love with Gene Simmons. Told my mom I wanted to be a bass player. She's like, oh, that's amazing, and we're going to get you a bass. She went to the store for like the holidays or whatever, and she came back with a guitar. And you can't go to your mom, idiot. I wanted to, it wasn't that generation yet, so I had to be like, oh, it's perfect. Guitar, just like Gene Simmons, thanks. So I started playing that, and slowly but surely, just around the neighborhood, jamming with people, people would learn, like the older kids in the neighborhood would learn like Cat Scratch Fever, and I think what was important for me was like the feedback cycles, because music just from a very young age made sense to me as to where I wasn't the best athlete in the neighborhood. I couldn't, street football, I was just coming back bloodied with very little point scoring. But when it came time for all the neighborhood kids to get together, like I kind of understood the language of music, so it made me feel good. And when things make you feel good, you tend to do it more. And it just starts this feedback cycle, which I think is important in anything you're going to do, whether you are playing hockey or music or anything. And the more that cycle started, the more I wound up playing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. I didn't want to do anything else, so it became a sickness, which is not good, but it worked out. And then my mom was working at a theater in South Florida and trying to always like engage me. She knew just enough to like kind of create these bumbling episodes of weirdness. And she worked at this musical theater, and she came home one night, and she's like, look, Osbert Ozen is coming to the Sunrise Musical Theater. You should go check that out. And I'm like, all right, I have tickets to Osbert Osborne, and I'll go check that out. And it turned out to be Randy Rhoads, Ozzy Osbourne, the Blizzard of Oz tour, like Rudy Zarzo. And I had like third row seats because she was working Man of La Mancha, the theater production at the time, and she had a great hookup. And
Did you go to that?
I did go to Man of La Mancha as well. It was it was musical theater or music. It was one of the two for me. But so sure enough, I mean, when you sit in the third row and you saw Randy Rhoads at that age, I was maybe 10 or 11, and it was just like everybody else, I think I was like, that's what I have to do. I mean, that's clearly what I have to do. I was always upset that I didn't weigh like 110 pounds and look good in those vests and those tight pants. It really like killed me. Don't think I didn't try.
Oh, dude, did you see this
There
guy
are
in the 80s
pictures
in
of me
tight
in some
vests and
pants that
tight
just are
pants? He
inappropriate.
looked amazing. Don't let him fool you.
I can
Don't
wear
let
it.
him
I
fool
can
you.
wear it. And then, I mean, from there on, I mean, it was just always music. I mean, it was just, and everything, like everybody said. I mean, I think there's a really weird thing where, you know, you were culturally identified in school by the music you listened to. So whether it was punk or metal, you'd eat lunch with the new wave kids or whatever you did. But I was never like that because even to this day, like I will go and listen to Barry Manilow or Meshuggah and love them both the same. I just love music. There's just two types of music, right?
That'd be a hell of a
It's
mashup
good and
right
the other
there.
kind. I mean, that's pretty much it. But that's how I started. And I mean, I fell in love with it more every day. Still find new things, hear new things. You know, see new musicians do stuff, and you're just like, I feel this, if not more so than I did when I was a kid. Now, just in awe of the whole thing. So, I mean, hopefully you guys go on a similar path at some point.
Not that anyone cares. Thank you, Jason. I got a microphone. I have a
Thank you.
stationary
I just want to say thank you very much.
Not that anybody cares, but I'll weigh in on this too. I started in music with all of these guys. Literally, every one of my favorite bands just about is sitting on this stage right now. And again, I grew up a huge Saigon Kick fan, and a huge Megadeth fan, and a huge Autograph fan, and a huge Guns N' Roses fan, and later a huge Korn fan. I ended up with this, you know, so, and love Mastodon. And Kyle was in another really cool band that I worked with early on in my career. And now is in Hell Yeah, another amazing, like all these guys, man, literally have been so influential in me and my music fandom. I mean, again, Megadeth is my Kiss. I mean, I love Kiss too. Lick It Up, that was my Kiss. But Megadeth, Autograph, and this guy put out some of the greatest records ever made right here, just so you know. So,
The
but
check
again,
is behind the curtain, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Just put it in my money bag. It's the one with the big dollar sign on.
I'm pretty much like, just to put things in perspective, I'm like the U2 of Walgreens or the, you know.
Yeah, anytime you
Yeah.
walk into a drugstore and hear "Love is on the way," blame that guy.
Which, by the way, is the radio edit because it was all about humping.
Let's talk about gear and what you guys. So basically, the takeaway from that is everybody basically wanted to be a bass player. Some of them stayed playing bass, and some of them became guitar players. Yeah, exactly. So good. The moral of the story is everybody's a bass player at heart. I think that's the takeaway. Not head. Good. Yeah, he won. Yeah, he just tunes his guitar 9 octaves down and plays with a bunch of weird pedals, so it sounds like a bass. Bass player. Let's talk about gear. Let's tell you, where's the mic? Where'd it go? Can we have it back? So let's start over here. Let's start on this side. Let's talk about gear and what you play through and kind of your rig and your setup.
Well, the most frustrating thing I think I've learned, and maybe people will agree or won't agree, is that every guitar player I love, and I don't mean this in a bad way about the music store or the gear here or anything like that, because it's all great shit. It's in your hands. Like, I've seen Eddie Van Halen play on a crappy amp with not his guitar, and it sounds remarkably like Eddie Van Halen. And yet you won't on that. So it's really a lot of that tone, a lot of that sound that, you know, Jeff Beck or you know, anybody you're talking about, Holdsworth, or, I mean, it doesn't matter what, anybody you bring up, it really comes from your hands, and you're always in search of, it's like, you know, a golfer, and I don't play golf, but yeah, if I just had a better stick, if I just had this ball with the extra windings or whatever, and it's really so much of it, I mean, I go as far as saying maybe 90% of it is in your hands. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll pass it on to
Thank you for deflecting the question, Jason. We still have no idea what you play through, but I guess you just play with your hands. It's okay.
Honestly, he's right. But I guess today we're in that weird middle ground of you have analog gear, which is always going to be the best, the real stuff, air moving. And then you have digital stuff that tries to sound like analog. But the thing about it is it's convenient, and you can bring it on a plane, and you can take it with you, and you have consistency, and it'll always be the sounds that you want. So fortunately, the digital stuff is getting better and getting closer. We were just talking about this in the back, how putting an impulse response at the end of the signal chain of one of your toys makes it sound like less of a toy. Things like that. So I find more and more for just quick travel stuff, I'm bringing either a Fractal AX8 or I'm bringing a Line 6 Helix with me and using that and getting all my sounds in that and just plug it into the effects loop of a nice tube head, getting the power section from that, pushing it through the speakers, always getting some air moving. And it's getting the job done. At least you think it's getting the job done until you put it next to someone with the real stuff, and then you realize how much digital is lacking in comparison. But it is getting closer. This is a very long run-on sentence I'm giving you. So let me just cut it down. I finally play a grown-up sized guitar, and the one I
Does
usually
that have
use...
nylon strings?
Oh, sometimes if I can find a... Yeah. So... So it's got a fretted neck on the bottom, it's got a fretless neck on top, it's got DiMarzio pickups in it. I play Court Acoustics with Fishman pickups, runs into a Engel amp, Celestion speakers, Marshall cabinet. Got the Fractal or the Line 6 in front, using the wah pedal from Morley wah pedal. What else? Recording studio, Steinberg stuff. I like Cubase, been using it since 1999, and it's whatever you're most comfortable with and gets you from point A to point B the quickest. And even the same way it's all your hands that makes your gear sound like whatever it sounds like. Well, with recording gear, it's all your ears that's going to make that sound like what it's going to sound like. It's people's judgment and what they do with it, which is going to make that sound good. So, yeah, that's enough about gear. Okay. Thanks.
Well, as everybody can probably agree with up here, we've gone through so many types of different, foot switchboards and everything, and multi-effects units and amplifiers and everything. But you're still searching all the time. You're still looking for that something a little bit better. What I'm playing through right now is ISP Technologies, the Theta X, and that's what we were talking about backstage, and about as far as getting an analog sound out of a digital pedal. And then, but on stage, I'm playing through a couple Marshall 2000s, so that's where my tube sound is actually coming from, and that's mic'd up like that. So, and that's what I'm using now. And of course, I'm still going to be looking for something just a little bit better. But Jason was right in saying that it's got a lot to do with your hands, just the way that you play, the way that you pick, the way that you do your hammer-ons, your pull-ups, your vibratos, your bending, your slides, and all that kind of stuff. It's all about phrasing techniques. That's what really is your sound, period. And you can pretty much play through anything. But what the amplifier does is it just enhances what you're already doing. Okay? So basically, it's all about the feel. Okay? Go on to Dave here.
Mr. Ellefson.
And now...
It is the hands. I've noticed that. I was bummed when I found out it was the hands because I always thought I could get it in a piece of gear off the wall if I want to sound like, again, Gene Simmons. He seems to be the man of the hour today. But Steve Harris, as I'm sitting here watching the Iron Maiden video in the back. But, there's signature guys that came along, Geddy Lee, Steve Harris, these guys, especially in the bass world, because most... again, I grew up, like I think Ron was saying, I grew up a product of the 70s, and that was a really explosive time when all these different effects, flangers, phasers, talk boxes, these really cool effects were coming out. Records were pretty groundbreaking at that time, and there was cool gear. So I think a lot of us probably kind of sought after getting that gear. And, I had Rickenbackers, a little Gibson. My first bass was a Gibson because on the back of the Kiss records it says Kiss use Gibson guitars and Pearl drums because they want the best. And I just wanted to be like Kiss, so I begged my mom to buy the bass. I went along with my mom, by the way, Jason, on that trip to get the bass. I went with her, right, just to confirm it was a bass, right? And but they did the same trick. I woke up one day and there's this nylon string guitar sitting on the bed or the chair by my bed. I go, I didn't want that. What is this? The action's this high. It's completely unenjoyable. And so finally, my dear sweet mother took me to, we bought a little, it was a Gibson EBO. It was $150. They have an EB3 in the back, $1,200. So I should have kept that bass.
Inflation.
It would have actually been worse. Yeah, inflation, right? But I got it home and I played it, and it didn't sound anything like Kiss Alive at all. It didn't sound like Firehouse and Cold Gin. It was like, there's something wrong with the bass. It doesn't sound like Kiss, right? And that was probably my first experiment that it's like, okay, it's probably going to be me. And as I started to play and as I got into different instruments, and I played with fingers, I played with pick. I mean, any bass players in the house here? Couple, right? So just even that alone, but how you play. If you're a slap guy, if you're a pick, the pick, the fingers. We were doing a session yesterday with the Psycho Tribe guys, and just little things like, especially in metal, which is kind of my specialty, because I love the music, so I like to record it and play it. But I have to play as much as I could play in perfect sort of fingering. The truth is, I have to play the bass like a guitar player would do it. A guitar player would slide up the notes, slide into notes, slide out of notes, and I have to play the bass the same way. I have to cop the same feel and pretty much play, even though it's kind of elementary and kind of like not very educated bass playing, I have to play it how a guitar player plays it so that the bass sits in the track the same way that the guitars do. And those are little details that you learn, especially when you're in the studio recording. So I picked up a Music Man bass. I loved it. I love those basses. I've just never been able to get a tone out of them that ever works for me. Same with Alembic. Alembic was like this high-end bass, and I loved it. And it's got 21 sounds that I can't use, any of them. So I, again, whatever I had, the BC Riches, the Jacksons. I walked into the Sunset Strip Guitar Center. I pulled a Jackson down. I plugged it into a Galleon Kruger, and it happened to be plugged into some Harkeys, and I hit it, and like, wow, there's my tone. And I love that sound, and I've been pretty much using that most of my Megadeth career, but I've got some Fenders I record with, an old Spectre, a bunch of old gear, and you just kind of, I think a lot of it is walking into, especially as bass players, you don't walk into the wedding gig with the 6-string, blah, 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 whatever. And you don't walk into the recording studio, with anything other than, bring your Fender, bring kind of your hammer and your screwdriver that works to get the job done, And I think you start, after you've been playing a while, you kind of approach it like that, and you just sort of have these instruments and different things around to just sort of plug and play, because most of the bass is a DI, it's a direct instrument, just a direct out to the front of house, into the console. Though that really is the tone, and they really want to hear what you're playing, not so much even what the gear is. And before I hand the mic off to Brian, I had an awesome experience with Brian. We had Korn out with us in 1995, and they were the brand new young band.
I was there.
And we went out, and I remember watching you guys and just going, these guys are so frickin' whacked. I don't know what this is, right? And we got it because it was ahead of the curve. And it's like, these guys are going to break up like next month, or this is going to change the world, right? And obviously the latter, they changed the world.
They broke up a month later.
Well, what was cool to see with them is they were a band that, when I was growing up, it was the fusion musicians who did all the clinics. They had all the Silgen endorsements, and they were doing the clinics. And then now later on, my generation, the Thrasher guys, our generation sells a lot of guitars in these music stores, right, to the fans. And what I got to see with Brian, with Korn, is they were using Ibanez and Mesa. And Metallica used Mesa, but never really on the stage. It was always kind of behind stuff, but we all kind of knew that Metallica had their sound from these Mesa amplifiers. And Korn came out, and because of the popularity of their band, they actually changed music stores and changed manufacturers and changed the entire landscape of like the NAMM show and what music stores carried. All of a sudden, Ibanez guitars were all the rave. Mesa amplifiers were all the rave. I mean, every band that came after you, Linkin Park and these huge game-changing bands, it's like, so nice job. You made people...
That's weird.
You paid people millions of dollars, my friend.
Man.
Yes, it was awesome.
Just 2%, man, just 2%. No, that's crazy. I never thought about it like that, and we didn't know. I'll just go back a little bit. The strange thing to me and the cool thing to me is like I was the one. I started playing at 10 years old, because that was AC/DC Back in Black, and that all started then. And then I met Fieldy, the bass player, when we were in 7th grade. And he had, those peachy folders? He had Duran Duran written on his, and I had Ozzy and Iron Maiden, and I'm like, dude, you need to get into Ozzy. And so a couple years later, he had long hair and moccasin boots, and so I converted one. And then I met Monkey in 9th grade, and he had chopped off a little bit of the meat on his finger. This hand, actually. We call it the land of the lost because it's missing still, but the doctor told him to do something to get his fingers going, right? And so he had an acoustic guitar, and then so I sold him my first electric that I got. So we go way back. So I kind of got those two starting their instruments, but it goes full circle because Monkey, he started getting to Steve Vai in about 89, and they moved to L.A. Him and Fieldy, I got them started on their instruments, but they started a band called LAPD, which was a Chili Peppers ripoff band, and they just left me in the dust. They left me in Bakersfield, moved to L.A., and I'm like, thanks. And so I became their tech. I was their roadie, and for their band after I moved to L.A. And so Monkey got into Steve Vai, and he started checking out that 7-string, at the guitar store, going there every day, and he's like, man, I just want to. And Ibanez was getting ready to take that out of stock because they just weren't selling. They were just too weird, Steve Vai, it's just who can do what Steve Vai does, And he wasn't using it for riffs. He was using it for like solos and doing I don't know. But Monkey just saved up and saved up. He'd go there every day and practice and play it at the guitar store until he finally got enough money. Then he brought it home. Fieldy found out about the 5-string, and they started playing with that and coming up with some. Like they would use the 7-string for the low, like a really low bridge section, and then the rest of the song would be like in regular standard tuning, and so when I was the roadie then, and they weren't going nowhere, and they got a crappy label, and their band didn't do nothing. They kicked out the singer, and that's when I joined, and then
LAPD was pretty crappy. I can vouch for
yes,
that. Actually,
they were, and so I joined, and then once I joined, they were back to like the more metal sound. Like we were all like in agreement. We need to go there, and because I can't bring the funk at all. I'm as white as you can get, man. And so Alice in Chains, and I remember No More Tears came out, and it was just this, it was kind of the grunge, the grunge sound was the low tuning and everything, and we're like, let's go lower. And so we started writing all our songs on the 7-string. Like we're like, let's just go all of it. And so once we got Jonathan in the band, we're like, oh my gosh, this gives it a whole new twist because this dude's like a crazy, different type of singer. And so yeah, that's what it was, a 7 strings. And then I remember we messed with some Hughes and Kettner in the beginning, and the Mesa Boogie thing was definitely it helped cement that sound. And then when Follow the Leader came out, we started getting to the weird, because we can't, like, these guys are players, man. These guys. Especially Bumblefoot over here, and so we're not really lead players. Monkey can shred a little bit, but so we just, it was like, this is too hard. This shredding stuff's too hard.
Let's get a bunch of pedals.
Yeah, let's get some pedal. That's easier. That's way easier. So we started doing that, and we got the whammy pedal we were talking about yesterday, and that was a huge thing. Like Here to Stay, our song Here to Stay, it was like we weren't low enough, so we brought an octave on the 7-string, and that was a big song for us. And so yeah, that's basically the gear: the whammy pedal, the chorus boss pedal. Monkey has like a 2-story pedal rack that he uses. I'm like 5 pedals. I keep it simple. So.
And now I'm pretty sure you use these guys back here, right? These orange amplifiers.
Yep, that orange for the clean channel I use because it's got a buttery, nice clean channel.
It is
but
pretty
I'll
buttery.
get into that. Yeah, that's my favorite word, buttery. I love butter. So that's it. Sorry if that was a little long, but there you go.
I skipped school and went to the arena to be first in line, thousands of people on the No More Tours tour, 1992. And I think we're in 2018 now. And Ozzy's still on the No More Tours
We
Part 2
just
tour.
had that conversation backstage. I saw Korn open on the No More Tours tour on their first record. So
this is a long last tour, Ozzy.
And now Megadeth is going to be out with them on the No More Tours tour in 2019.
I'm going.
I think we all are.
So that was a trip, but I was first in line of about 17,000 people, and that was cool. That was the most memorable skipping school day. But yeah, I'm not married to gear. There is always a lot of musicians have like this eternal search because there's always, I've got 70 pedals at home, but when I tour, I only use 3 because they're fun, you know. And it's like I collect them, but I don't use but 3 when it comes time to do some business. But my comfort zone with Mastodon is I play Warwick basses, Fender basses, and Zahn basses, and I play Orange, Mesa, and Ampeg amps, and they're all great combos. And I don't even know which combo is plugged in each night because I ask our younger brother Darren, who's my bass tech, to mix it up every night. Just plug in whatever, and it always sounds good. So I play what I love and love what you play. I think that's important. But the music does come from the fingers, and it comes from within because if songcraft will outshine production any day. And if you listen, if we write a batch of really strong songs, and it sounds production-wise like Reckless Eric, or in the metal world, if we did a new record and it has Injustice for All production, people will recognize as strong songs in a great album. So.
But then you wouldn't be on it though. So.
Well, that way I can hang out, go to the beach or something.
We're gonna have to ask Toby Wright about that tomorrow. I've already prepared him for that.
So yeah, it does mostly come from within, I believe. But you find your gear that you love for what you're doing, and it is all good. Brother Kyle.
Woo!
I'm, for better or worse, put all my eggs in one basket. I don't know if I really recommend that, but that's just what I started with and stuck with. I'm 100% orange. I played Ampegs and Mesas, which are great. Both of them are great. I still have some old gear, but I'm all orange. They're just great, solid, beat the shit out of the amps. Good people, good everything. So that's what I have a lot of, and turn people on to it. All Warwick bass as well, because they were the ones that really catered to lefties, which is what first drew me to them. Some companies I'd go to, and they just wouldn't. They said, we don't really have a demand for lefties. I said, well, I'm demanding one. And they just didn't. They said, well, here, try this. And it was just a piece of crap. They didn't try and perfect it or anything. And Warwick has a lot of lefties and everything, so that drew me towards them. And that was in 2002. And that's another bass that you can just beat the hell out of. And they're solid. They're amazing. So I stick with those. I have a Rickenbacker and old precision bass, which are 76 and 78, which are great basses. I just don't tour with them. And I'm a less is more kind of guy. I love pedals. I love playing with them at home. And I think you do struggle to find that one awesome distortion, which I don't know if it really exists exactly what you want. You lose the bottom, but the top sounds great, or sounds good playing by yourself, and you bring it to practice and you disappear. So, Warwick to orange works for me. And like everybody said, I'm a finger player. I always hear pick players, they have great tones, like Dave does. Like I always thought Mike Inez, Alice in Chains, he's one of the sickest tones live. And I just don't know how they get it, but it's his picking. And I immediately started playing with fingers, so I stuck with it. And I have amazingly, not bragging, but strong fingers that I've found out from other people. I'm a great thumb wrestler. And it's totally the tone. I'll sit in a studio where it's a little more controlled and you feel a little more timid because you don't want to really go for it. But you can tell, like the harder you play, the more the attack, but you try to find that balance of the slap and attack without it being too high-endy and tingy. Like exactly what you said about music, man. I felt the same way. They're great basses. I pick them up and I play them, and it just does not work for me. It works. I see someone playing it. It sounds great. It's like, that's cool. I'm going to try it. You can't get the tone. I just cannot get it. Maybe I play too hard because it's too tingy and attacky. But yeah, I'll keep it short. That's just less is more. Stick with your guns and hope for the best.
Give it up for Kyle. I'm going to come up there. You guys got any questions? I'll come out and we'll ask some questions, and then we'll wrap up and let these guys shred a little bit for you. So, yeah.
Shredding while the sun's out, right?
I know. You can't shred before noon. Come on. I bet you Bumblefoot's up like 7 in the morning with his thimble. Like he is. All right, who's got a question? Anybody? You guys have to have a damn question. Ask a question, boy.
We've answered all their questions.
Oh, you covered everything. All right, I guess we're done here. Oh, we do? Okay, good. Here you go. I don't know if I can get to you. I'll just hand it.
I think I can answer this. A lot of working out.
All right, so my question is about had said that you played cleans with the orange. So what about the riffs and the distortion? Is that you use Mesa Boogie for that?
Sure, yeah, sure.
We've messed with. We started early on. We got a Hughes and Kettner, and then we moved to Mesa Boogie. Pretty much after that, I've messed with different ones. The what's it called? The Ubersol. Who makes that? What is it? Bogner. I love Bogner too, but right now we're Mesa Boogie, and but when we record, it's all over the place. Like we'll mix different tones, like the Mesa Boogie with Bogners, with old orange amps, and then so it's a like free for all, and then we'll have like vintage tiny, like right now we have these vintage, like decades old little amps, and we're just miking them, getting this, so it's fun. In the studio it's fun. It's just like mad scientists, and they're just going nuts with whatever. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, got one more over here. It's our last question. My arm doesn't go that far.
So, like with any creative process and creative endeavor, whether it be art or music, there's periods of burnout and stuff. How do you guys kind of like survive or come out because there's always a love affair with your instrument, and either with touring or just oversaturation. How do you guys kind of cope, and what do you find usually kind of pulls you right back into that kind of thing?
What a great question, right? Yep. Who wants it?
Who's going to answer it most quickly?
For me, I know coming off of tour, you're in a performance mindset, which has its own creative things. Like we talk about different things. It's more like plays on a football field. Okay, you go here, and then you end around, and he comes in, and you go up on the box, and this guy comes back, and there's kind of like doing like sports plays, right? But you're in a performance mode, and I find it difficult to be very creative in that. Yet sometimes the phone will ring, and someone says, "Hey, do you want to, work on a record together? Would you like to write? Would you like to produce?" And it'll be something completely, in my case, not Megadeth related, and that will suddenly start getting some juices flowing. I know on the Countdown to Extinction tour in '92, I just started going to guitar shops and picking up and buying guitars. I'd had an endorsement, so I got a lot of stuff for free, which was a wonderful thing. But I found that they were all kind of like heavy metal guitars, and I started walking into music stores and really kind of falling in love with like old Gibsons, and they weren't expensive. I wasn't like trying to be a collector. And I found that sometimes you just pick up a certain guitar. Like I bought an Epiphone Sheridan for like $400 up in New York. I think it's Sam Ash or something in New York City. And songs, I sat in my hotel room and songs just fell out of this guitar. It's almost like the guitar had songs in it, which obviously it was just what we talked about in your hands. Just a different inspiration came. And so that, for me, will do it. Sometimes I'll go home, I leave guitars sitting out, and sometimes I come home and it's like, I do not want to look at a guitar, and I'll literally just take a month off, not play, don't touch an instrument, just let my body refresh and reset itself after beating the heck out of it on the road, and those are just a couple things for me, and suddenly, you'll hear something on the radio, or you'll sit down, I'll sit on my piano for a minute and just put my fingers anywhere, and whatever chord starts, I just start writing off of that. So sometimes doing anything other than playing the bass in Megadeth will get me going, and suddenly I come up with some cool stuff for Megadeth, because I'm not thinking in that paradigm. So that's one of the couple things for me. Anything?
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we got, or we're not going to be able to have time for clinics. So let's give it up for all of these guys, man. Jason Bieler, Bumblefoot, Steve Lynch, David Ellefson, Brian Welch, Troy Sanders, Kyle Sanders. What an awesome, thank you guys so much. That was awesome.